Hi, this is Anthony. Welcome back to my show and Happy New Year. Let's jump right into a few comments and questions that I've gotten recently about the D.B. Cooper case. So, this is a comment about Kenny Christensen, whom his brother Lyle, many years after the fact, said that he had come to the realization that his brother Kenny was D.B. Cooper. This is based on what is presented as a fact that on his deathbed, Kenny told Lyle that he had a secret that he wished he could tell him, but he couldn't. I and other people have surmised that the secret was probably that Kenny was gay. And I go into the reason for that in the video being referenced. And of course, as I point out, other people have surmised that also. The viewer states, his brother stated in an interview that they've known he was gay since he was a teenager. So I really doubt that that was what he wanted to confess. I was not aware of any interview where Kenny's brother discussed Kenny being gay. Obviously, that validates my point, and certainly in no way does it support the contention that Kenny Christensen was D.B. Cooper. Christensen worked for the airline that was being hijacked, and after the hijacking, he continued working at the airline. It makes absolutely no sense for somebody to carry out the hijacking that Cooper did and then continue showing up for work at the same airport where that crew was flying in and out of. Eventually, they would have noticed Kenny walking around the terminal and go, "Oh, that's the guy that hijacked us." Quite frankly, Kenny Christensen, of all the suspects, is the least likely. So what was Kenny's secret that he supposedly couldn't tell his brother? Well, if it wasn't that he was a closeted gay man, assuming that the family already knew, it was probably something like, "Remember when I was 16 and the dog got run over and I blamed it on the neighbor? Well, that was really me," or something like that. And even if he was D.B. Cooper, why couldn't he tell his brother on his deathbed? Is his brother immediately going to call the FBI, who's going to rush over, burst through the door, and arrest Kenny decades after the crime as he's dying? Again, none of that makes sense. So let's move on. Here's some comments from Uncle Jim 2, not to be confused with anybody masquerading as Uncle Jim 1. From my experience living through this, true reservation natives and Canadians had a distinct accent and way of speaking in the Northwest, especially in the 1970s. Are you from there or winging it? Agent Carr talks about what happened to the butts and hair on the Vortex interview, and again, the diatoms and rubber bands prove otherwise on the money found. Kaye tested and explains both in depth. Dan Gryder is the typical make it, well, I won't finish the rest of that, but you can read it. Of the first part, I agree with you in general. I know a Native American gentleman who's a bit younger than me, and I don't believe that he was from a reservation, but certainly speaks slightly different than many other people from this area. But we also have to remember that from time to time, there were instances, both in Canada and the United States, where Aboriginal or Native children were taken from their parents or somehow ended up with, let us say, Anglo families. If somebody of, say, Native American ancestry grew up in an English-speaking WASP household in the Pacific Northwest, then they may well have no trace of an accent that you mentioned. And again, I'm not pushing that theory as what really happened, simply as a possibility that we need to keep in mind when we're looking at suspects, especially because the eyewitnesses said that Cooper had darker skin, possibly Mexican or Indian or even Italian ancestry. A lot of people forget that because we see D.B. Cooper portrayed in the media as usually a very white man. As far as the rubber bands and diatoms on the paper money that was found at Tina Bar, some researchers want to make it sound like the rubber bands were in perfect condition. If you read the material from that time, and even serious researchers since then, the rubber bands were reported to completely crumble upon being touched. There are no remnants of them left simply because they turned to dust when exposed to air and being touched. I have watched Tom Kaye's presentation on a 2-part video where there might have been a few moments in the middle that didn't get captured, but everything that he talked about concerning the diatoms was on the videos. This was from CooperCon a few years ago. Now, certainly Tom Kaye is a scientist, where his fields of interest are in paleontology and astrophysics. He seems to be a very smart man, and I have nothing against him. When it comes to science, I'm sure that he's far smarter than me. I'm not a scientist, although I have a graduate degree actually in political science, which is hardly a science at all, but still, it shows me that people in academia can make mistakes from time to time. I've seen lots of that. Watching Tom talk about some of the experiments that they did with the diatoms to replicate what happened do not convince me at all. I think that there are many, many unanswered questions, and just as 3 particles of a reputed titanium alloy is not a slam dunk that Vince Peterson from REM Crew was D.B. Cooper, nor does this particular report indicating that the money was in the water at some other time rather than in late November or early December. That just doesn't convince me at this point. As far as your comments about Dan Gryder, he wasn't very happy with one of my videos concerning his discovery of the parachutes, and he's not going to be happy with a future video that goes minute by minute through his documentaries. But I think that the biggest mystery in the whole Cooper sphere is, how does Eric Ulis only have about 1,250 subscribers to his channel, and Dan Gryder have over 95,000 subscribers? Again, I'll leave it at that. Thank you for the comments. Here's another comment with a lot of good thoughts contained in it. This was a good video, and yeah, 100 particles versus 3. That is really nothing. But anyway, I think we're going down the wrong path here. The tie was a plant. Why else would he take it off and leave it on the plane? I might be more interested in the bomb that he had. I'm assuming that most people believe that it was fake, but there is no way to prove that. I've never heard many people ask who was qualified to make a suitcase bomb. Now, this is referring to one of the videos that I've done concerning the titanium particles found on the tie. I want to make it clear that I think that everything found on the tie is relevant, potentially. And I've done a number of videos specifically about aspects of the tie in case people have not seen them, or to recap, I do believe that the tie was left by Cooper. Some people think that it was left by somebody else. No, not at all. It was left by Cooper. I personally believe that he either left it behind by accident or he didn't think that it would be a clue. Remember, in 1971, nobody was thinking about DNA or microscopic particles on the tie. In fact, the tie was not even examined by the FBI, but rather they let citizen sleuths test it well after the turn of the new century. I think that if the tie did belong to Cooper, which I believe it did, it's likely that the tie was the one that he wore to work on a regular basis. And so it could help narrow down the pool of candidates. It sounds like DNA was found on the tie, but was not necessarily useful. It's not really clear from what I've seen or heard what the extent of the DNA is. And as I've pointed out in my videos, ties are great for picking up all kinds of things. And if you have engineers who wear the same tie every day for years, and they were working in close proximity in a lab with other employees, their ties are going to pick up DNA from lots of people, just from people accidentally spitting while they're talking at close range. And so, while there is likely some DNA on the tie from whomever Cooper was, there is most likely also DNA from other people on it, which could help narrow things down, or it could send people off on a wild goose chase. As far as the titanium particles on the tie, originally it seemed as though they were pure titanium. This is information which is still on Tom Kaye's Citizen Sleuth's website, although now it seems like there could have been a number of pure titanium and other particles on the tie, evidently 100,000 particles of various substances, but there also may be 3 particles of a particular titanium alloy. As I've discussed, Eric Ulis believes that this particular alloy of titanium and antimony could only be found in one lab at a company called REM Crew in Pennsylvania. I point out that the alloy actually was developed at another lab in Columbus, Ohio, and there were likely people working on the same type of alloy in other parts of the world subsequent to that time. And I show copies of documentation which indicate what I'm saying is accurate. So I think that there are valid clues that could be gleaned from the tie, but I think that we need to be extremely cautious when trying to make conclusions that only 8 people in a lab ever dealt with it, and that it must have been Vince Peterson. I hypothesize that there's only 3 particles out of, say, 100 that whomever came into contact with it probably didn't work with it much. I have a potential theory, and again, this is not my one and only theory because I don't have one. But my theory is that Cooper, rather than being an engineer in the aerospace or high-tech fields, could have been somebody else, such as a government inspector of some type. A former soldier with paratroop experience transitioning to civilian life, working as a disgruntled, low-paid safety inspector or something along those lines, could be somebody that might have had a grudge against a corporation or the government and would be wearing a tie, going around to various facilities, and his tie picking up compounds and metals and other substances from the places that he visits and inspects. And again, I don't believe that he intentionally left the tie behind as a clue. I think in his haste to prepare to depart the plane, he either forgot about it or he realized that he didn't need a clip-on tie flopping around his face as he jumped out and never thought that it would be any evidence on the tie, which was a very common tie sold by JCPenney, that would connect him to any particular laboratory or company. As far as the bomb is concerned, my understanding is that Tina Mucklow, the flight attendant, stated that the sticks of dynamite were colored red. As one viewer pointed out, dynamite actually does not come wrapped in red paper, but usually is yellow or a lighter color. I verified that, and it does seem to be correct. So what she could have seen could have been a fake bomb that was either made up with completely fake sticks of dynamite wrapped in red paper, or else they could have been flares which seemed to be wrapped in red paper and would also be useful for somebody needing to attract their accomplice once they landed on the ground. I think at this point there's no way for anybody to conclusively say this was or was not an actual bomb. Unless you intended to detonate a bomb, you're probably not going to bring a real bomb along with you, just because a real bomb might, for whatever reason, accidentally go off. And I'm not a bomb expert, but it just seems like it would be much easier and safer to construct a realistic-looking fake bomb. And again, he's not showing it to a bomb expert. He's opening the attaché case and showing it to the flight attendant, probably literally for 2 or 3 seconds. Okay, those were some excellent comments and questions. Thank you for everyone who took the time. If you haven't already, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to this channel. It doesn't cost you anything, and it just takes 1 second to click the button. I would love it if you left a comment. What do you think about the answers that I provided? Do you have any favorite candidates as far as who Cooper might have been? If you like this type of content or any of my other content, I would really be humbled if you'd click the like button on those videos. Thank you very much for watching.